The sound in room 304 was not a scream. It was not a cry of pain. It was a rhythmic, low-frequency hum that had persisted for 72 hours without a break. To the doctors at St. Jude's Convalescent Home, it was the incoherent rambling of a brain eaten away by advanced dementia. To the nurses changing the sheets, it was just background noise, as irrelevant as the hum of the refrigerator or the rattle of the radiator in the corner. They called it the O'Neill drone. They laughed about it in the break room. They complained that it kept the other residents awake. They saw an old man, withered and small, lost in the chaotic firing of dying neurons. They were wrong. They were looking at a broken machine, but they should have been looking at a sentinel. The man in the bed was not lost. He was working. Thomas O'Neill lay flat on his back, his eyes fixed on a water stain on the ceiling that looked vaguely like a map of a forgotten continent. His hands, spotted with age and trembling with a slight palsy, were not resting. They were tapping. His right index finger moved against the starch of the hospital sheet. Tap, tap, pause, tap. His lips moved in perfect synchronization with the finger. The voice was dry like leaves scraping over concrete, but the enunciation was razor-sharp. 7, 2, break vector, 9, 9, confirm, 0. He inhaled, a shallow, rattling breath that sounded like a bellows full of dust. 7, 2, break, vector, 9, 9, confirm, 0. Most people look at the elderly in these facilities and see only what is left, never what was there before. The staff saw a 90-year-old indigent ward of the state with no living relatives and a file thick with medical jargon describing cognitive decline. They saw the shell. They did not see the iron that held the shell together. They did not know that for 3 decades, Thomas had not just been a soldier. He had been a ghost. He belonged to a classification of service that didn't get parades. There were no ticker-tape celebrations for men who sat in concrete bunkers beneath the frost line, waiting for the world to end. There were no medals for the men whose heroism consisted of absolute, unyielding silence. The doctor, a tired man named Dr. Aris, who viewed his rotation at St. Jude's as a purgatory before a better hospital placement, stood at the foot of the bed. He scribbled on a clipboard, not even looking at Thomas's face. "Increase the haloperidol," Dr. Aris muttered to the floor nurse. "He's agitated. The repetition is a sign of a neurological loop. It's distressing the family in 305. "He doesn't seem distressed, doctor," the nurse said, glancing at Thomas. "He just won't stop." "It's a misfiring brain stem," Aris said, finally looking up, his eyes devoid of curiosity. "It's like a record skipping. Just sedate him enough to get him to sleep. If he keeps talking, his throat is going to bleed." They walked away. They left the door slightly ajar, allowing the hallway light to slice across Thomas's face. They didn't hear the shift in his tone. They didn't hear the urgency creeping into the whispers. 7, 2, break, vector, negative, correction, correction. Thomas's brow furrowed. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, rolling down into his silver hairline. In his mind, he wasn't in a nursing home in Ohio. The smell of antiseptic and boiled cabbage didn't exist. In his mind, the air smelled of ozone, stale coffee, and high-voltage electronics. He was sitting in a chair bolted to the floor. The red light was blinking. The printer was chattering. He was 24 years old, and he was the only thing standing between a sleeping city and total annihilation. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't stop. If he stopped speaking, the line would go dead. And if the line went dead, they would think the station had fallen. He had to keep the line open. He had to confirm he was still there. 7, 2, break, acknowledge, acknowledge. He waited for a reply that hadn't come in 60 years. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. To Thomas, that silence was terrifying. It meant he was alone. It meant the receiver on the other end might be gone. So he spoke louder. "Acknowledge. This is Watchtower. Acknowledge." The tragedy of the situation was absolute. Here was a man demonstrating the highest form of discipline a human being can muster. The refusal to abandon a post even when the body is failing, and the world around him treated it as a nuisance. It was the ultimate invisible battle. He was fighting World War III inside a skull that was betraying him, fighting to protect people who were currently annoyed by his voice. Enter Liam. Liam was not like Dr. Aris. Liam was 26, quiet, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of his own battles. He had taken the night shift because he preferred the quiet. He preferred the company of those at the end of their journey. He had served 4 years in the Signal Corps, a legacy passed down from his grandfather, before a back injury sent him home and into nursing school. He understood the language of silence. He understood that sometimes what isn't said is heavier than what is. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. The facility was locked down for the night. The only light came from the nurses' station and the exit signs. The rain had started outside, a relentless drumming against the single-pane window of room 304. Liam was doing his rounds, checking vitals, turning patients to prevent bed sores. He pushed his cart to Thomas's door and stopped. He had heard the complaints during the shift change. "The crazy guy in 304 is looping. Just ignore him." But Liam didn't hear crazy. He stood in the doorway listening. The hallway was silent, amplifying the voice from the bed. 9-4, Delta, hold. 9-4, Delta, hold. Frequency static, boosting gain. Liam froze. His hand, reaching for the sanitizer dispenser, stopped in midair. Boosting gain. That wasn't the rambling of a man remembering a grocery list or a childhood pet. That was technical syntax. Liam stepped into the room. He didn't turn on the overhead light. He moved softly, like he was entering a church. He approached the bed and looked down at Thomas. The old man's eyes were wide open, staring at that spot on the ceiling, but they were unseeing. They were dilated, focused on an infinite distance. "Mr. O'Neill?" Liam whispered. "Thomas?" Thomas didn't blink. "Interference high. Repeating vector. 7-2. Liam looked at Thomas's hand, the finger tapping on the sheet. Tap, 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 tap. Liam's heart hammered against his ribs. It wasn't random tremors. It was a cadence. 3 shorts. 3 shorts. It was a holding pattern, a standby rhythm used by operators when the line was open but no data was being sent yet. Liam pulled up the chair next to the bed and sat down. For the first time in 3 days, someone wasn't trying to silence Thomas. Someone was trying to listen. "I hear you, Thomas," Liam whispered, leaning close to the old man's ear. Thomas paused. For a microsecond, the tapping stopped. Then it resumed. Faster, more urgent. "Station check. Station check. Identity verify. Sierra, Tango, 1. Do you copy?" Liam felt a chill crawl up his spine that had nothing to do with the drafty window. Sierra Tango 1. That was a call sign, but not a modern one. It was archaic, heavy, something from the deep freeze of the 1950s or 60s. Thomas began to thrash slightly. His heart rate monitor, which had been a steady rhythmic beep, began to accelerate. The numbers on the screen climbed. 90, 100, 110. "Lost carrier," Thomas gasped, panic edging into his monotone voice. "Lost carrier! Blind! Going blind!" He wasn't talking about his eyes. He was talking about the signal. This is where the tragedy of the forgotten soldier cuts the deepest. We assume that when the uniform comes off, the duty ends. We assume that retirement means peace. But for men like Thomas, the oath doesn't have an expiration date. The oath is fused to the bone. When the mind is stripped away by age, when the memories of weddings and birthdays and taxes dissolve into the fog of dementia, what remains is the bedrock, the core foundation. And for Thomas O'Neill, the foundation was his watch. He was the man who held the wall, and right now, he believed the wall was falling. If you believe every life holds a story worth remembering, subscribe to this channel and join our community. The tension in the room spiked. The monitor began to alarm, a high-pitched warning that Thomas's tachycardia was entering a dangerous zone. The door burst open. It was the night shift supervisor, Nurse Ratchid. Not her real name, but the energy was the same. Her name was Brenda, and she was efficient, cold, and tired. "What is going on in here?" she hissed, moving quickly to the monitor. "He's spiking. Did you give him the sedative?" "No," Liam said, standing up, blocking her path to the IV bag. "He's not agitated, Brenda. He's panicked. He's delirious, Liam. Look at his BPM. He's going to stroke out. Get out of the way." "Listen to him," Liam said, his voice low and intense. "Just listen to what he's saying." "I don't have time for gibberish," Brenda snapped. She reached for the syringe of haloperidol on the cart. "He needs to calm down now, or his heart is going to give out." "Sector compromised," Thomas shouted, his voice cracking, finding a volume that seemed impossible for his frail lungs. "Sector compromised. Authentication required. They are breaking through. Authentication!" He tried to sit up. The wires and tubes pulled at his skin. He was fighting an invisible enemy, grappling with a phantom intruder in a bunker that existed only in 1962. "Hold him down," Brenda ordered, uncapping the needle. "Don't do it," Liam said. "He's asking for authentication. If you sedate him now, he'll think he failed. He'll think the station was overrun." Brenda looked at Liam like he had lost his mind. "He thinks he's eating ice cream on the moon, Liam. He has dementia. Now hold his arm." This was the collision of two worlds. The clinical world, obsessed with biological markers and silence, and the human world, where dignity and story matter more than a quiet hallway. Brenda saw a patient acting out. Liam saw a soldier under siege. Liam made a choice. It was a small choice, but it was the kind that defines a career. He stepped back from the bed, allowing Brenda access, but he pulled out his phone. He hit record. "Do what you have to do," Liam said softly. Brenda injected the sedative into the IV port. "It's for his own good. He needs to rest." The drug hit Thomas's system quickly. His eyes fluttered. The shouting turned into a slur. The panic didn't leave his face, though. It just became trapped behind a wall of chemical haze. Authentication, Thomas mumbled, a tear leaking from the corner of his eye. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated failure. He believed he was blacking out at his post. He believed he had let them in. His hand, heavy with the drug, tapped one last time on the sheet. A single, weak tap. Then silence. Brenda checked the monitor. The heart rate slowed. "There, peace and quiet. Keep an eye on his pressures." She marched out of the room, satisfied with a job well done. Liam stood alone in the dim light. He looked at the old man, who was now sleeping the sleep of the chemically forced. It wasn't peace. It was defeat. Thomas O'Neill looked smaller than ever. Liam sat back down. He played the recording on his phone. He put it to his ear. 7, 2, break, vector, 9, confirm, 0. Liam took a pen from his pocket and grabbed a paper towel from the bedside table. He played the audio again. He wrote down the numbers. He wrote down the words. He separated the cadence. He looked at the pattern. It wasn't just numbers. It was a grid. Liam had seen something like this before. During his training, they had studied old analog encryption methods, the one-time pad systems used during the height of the Cold War. Unbreakable codes unless you had the matching book. He looked at Thomas's personal effects on the small shelf. A plastic comb, a picture frame turned face down, a dusty watch. Liam picked up the picture frame. He turned it over. It wasn't a family photo. It was a black and white photo of a young man, Thomas, standing in front of a massive metallic wall of dials and switches. He was wearing headphones. He looked tired but alert. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, was written, Station 4, The Long Wait, 1958. Liam pulled out his phone again. He began to search. Station 4 Military History, Cold War Listening Posts, Vector 99. The internet was vast, but specific military history is often buried. He found nothing on Station 4 directly. It was likely a classified designation, but he found forums. Forums where old radio operators gathered to swap stories of frequencies that didn't exist and broadcasts that never happened. He posted a thread. Subject: Urgent. Veteran Reciting Code. Station 4. Sierra Tango 1. Need context. Body: I have a patient. He thinks he's on duty. He's reciting these coordinates. Insert transcript. He's dying. He won't rest until he gets an authentication. Does anyone know what this is? He hit send. The digital bottle thrown into the digital ocean. The rest of the night was agonizingly slow. Thomas slept, but it was a fitful sleep. He twitched. He moaned. The delirium was fighting the sedative. The mission was fighting the chemistry. Around 4 a.m., Liam's phone buzzed. A notification, a reply. User, Old Sparky 62. Comment: Kid, if he's saying Sierra Tango 1, you need to be careful. That's not a standard radio check. That's a dead hand protocol. Where is this man? Liam typed back furiously. He's in a nursing home. He thinks he's losing the signal. What is dead hand? The reply came instantly. Old Sparky 62. It's a failsafe. It's the code you broadcast when you think command has been wiped out. He thinks the war has started, kid, and he's the last one left to confirm before the retaliation automated systems kick in. In his head, he's holding the trigger. Liam stared at the phone. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Thomas wasn't just reciting nonsense. In his mind, the world had gone silent. The bombs had fallen. Command was gone. He was the sole survivor in a bunker, asking if anyone was left alive. If he didn't get an answer, his orders, burned into his brain 60 years ago, were likely to initiate a sequence. A sequence that, in reality, would do nothing. But in Thomas's reality, he was holding the fate of millions. He was stressed because he thought he was about to launch a nuclear retaliation, because no one would answer his phone call. The weight of that burden was crushing. To carry that for 60 years. To have that be the last thing your mind clings to. The monitor beeped. Thomas was waking up. The sedative was wearing off faster than it should have. His metabolism was burning through it, fueled by adrenaline. Thomas's eyes snapped open. He didn't look at Liam. He looked at the ceiling. System failure imminent, Thomas whispered. His voice was weaker now, raspy. Battery backup failing. 3 minutes to transmission loss. 3 minutes to auto-execute. Thomas, Liam said, leaning in. Thomas, listen to me. No contact, Thomas said, tears streaming down his face again. God forgive me. No contact. Initiating final sequence. He wasn't speaking to the room anymore. He was speaking to God. Liam looked at his phone. Old Sparky 62 was typing again. Old Sparky 62. He needs the all clear. If he's Station 4, he's part of the Northern Grid. The countercode isn't a number. It's a phrase. A specific phrase used to tell the operators to stand down, that it was a drill, or that the crisis is averted. Liam, what is it? Tell me. Old Sparky 62. I don't know it. Every station had a unique one. It was usually kept in a sealed envelope in the safe. only to be opened if the operator was about to turn the key. If he doesn't hear it, he's going to die thinking he destroyed the world. Liam looked around the room, a sealed envelope, a safe. He looked at the dusty watch on the shelf. He looked at the nightstand. There was a small locked drawer in the bedside table where the facility kept the patient's wallets and ID. Liam didn't have the key. Only Brenda had the key. 2 minutes, Thomas rasped. Inputting launch coordinates, Alpha 1. Liam ran into the hallway. The corridor was empty. He ran to the nurse's station. Brenda was in the back room taking a break. He saw the keys on the counter. He grabbed them. It was a violation of protocol. It was a fireable offense. He didn't care. He sprinted back to room 304. Beta 2, Thomas chanted. His hand was shaking violently now, his finger hovering over an imaginary button on the bedsheet. Confirming access. Liam jammed the key into the drawer. He twisted it. The lock clicked. He pulled the drawer open. Inside there was a worn leather wallet, a set of dog tags, and a small red notebook. Not an envelope, a notebook. Liam grabbed the notebook. It was swollen with humidity. The pages stuck together. 1 minute, Thomas said. Forgive us. Liam ripped the notebook open. The pages were filled with dates. 1959, 1960, 1961. Shifts, weather reports, mundane details. He flipped to the back. The very last page. There was a folded piece of paper taped to the back cover. It was yellowed, brittle. On it, typed in red ink, were the words, Emergency Protocol, Termination of Watch. Liam scanned the text. It was complex, codes, verify. Then, at the bottom, in bold, voice countersign. 30 seconds, Thomas choked out. He was hyperventilating. His heart rate was 140. Executing. Liam read the phrase. He didn't understand it, but he could read it. He dropped the notebook and grabbed Thomas's hand. He squeezed it hard, trying to break the trance. "At Station 4, Station 4!" Liam shouted, using his command voice, the voice he learned in basic training. "This is command. Do you copy?" Thomas stopped. His finger froze millimeters from the sheet. His eyes, wild and terrified, shifted. For the first time, they locked onto Liam's face. "Command?" Thomas whispered. The hope in his voice was heartbreaking. "Station 4 reporting. Dead hand is active. I haven't heard from you in..." "We are here, Station 4, Liam said, his voice trembling slightly. "We are here. We were blocked by the storm. Do not execute. Repeat, do not execute." Thomas looked skeptical. The paranoia of the dementia was strong. "Code? I need the code. Protocol dictates..." "I have the code, Station 4, Liam said. He looked at the paper again to make sure he had it perfect. He took a breath. The room was silent. The rain had stopped. The only sound was the monitor. This was the moment. The bridge between the forgotten past and the present. The moment where a simple nursing assistant became the voice of a nation for a dying man. Liam leaned in, his eyes locked with Thomas's. "The code is Project Bluebird. Status safe. The horizon is clear. Stand down, Sentinel. I repeat, stand down." The words hung in the sterile air of room 304, vibrating with a weight that felt heavier than the concrete walls of the bunker Thomas believed he was inhabiting. Liam's voice didn't waver. He spoke with the absolute authority of a commanding officer, channeling every ounce of respect he held for the trembling man before him. For 3 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The rain outside had ceased, leaving a dripping silence in the gutter pipes. The monitor continued its frantic, high-pitched rhythm. Beep, 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 beep. A metronome of panic counting down to a catastrophe only Thomas could see. Thomas's finger remained frozen in the air, the muscle twitching, poised to strike the invisible key that would unleash hell. His eyes, clouded with cataracts and terror, bored into Liam's soul. He was searching for deception. He was looking for the enemy. Then, the physiological miracle happened. It started in the shoulders. The rigid tension, which had held Thomas's frail body in a state of combat readiness for 3 days, suddenly evaporated. His shoulders dropped. The finger, hovering over the imaginary launch button, curled slowly into a soft, trembling fist. It lowered gently to the mattress, not as a surrender, but as a completion. Thomas exhaled. It was a sound Liam would never forget, a long, shuddering release of air that seemed to carry 60 years of held breath with it. It was the sound of a man putting down a mountain he had carried on his back since 1958. "Bluebird," Thomas whispered. The robotic cadence was gone. The code voice that had annoyed the doctors and terrified the nurses vanished, replaced by the crackling human voice of a tired old man. "Bluebird is confirmed." "Confirmed," Liam said, his throat tight. He reached out and placed his hand over Thomas's fist, grounding him in the here and now. "The horizon is clear, Thomas. The threat is gone. Command has assumed control. Your watch is over." The heart monitor slowed. The frantic beep, beep, beep decelerated, spacing out into a steady rhythmic pulse. Beep, beep, beep. The numbers on the screen dropped. 130, 110, 90, 75. The physiological storm had passed. Thomas blinked, and for the first time in weeks, the fog of dementia seemed to part. It is a phenomenon known in palliative care as terminal lucidity, a final, brief candle flicker of the mind before the darkness takes over completely. His eyes focused on Liam. He didn't see a commanding officer anymore. He saw a young man in scrubs, but he didn't look confused. He looked grateful. "I thought..." Thomas's voice was barely audible. "I thought I missed the check-in." The silence was so loud. "You didn't miss it," Liam assured him, pulling the blanket up to Thomas's chin. "You held the line, Thomas. You kept us safe." Thomas turned his head slightly to look at the window, where the first hint of grey dawn was beginning to smudge the black sky. "It's a lonely job," he murmured. "Sitting in the dark, waiting for the end of the world. You promise yourself you won't blink. You promise you won't sleep." A single tear tracked through the deep crevices of his cheek. "I was so tired, son. I've been tired for a very long time." If this story touched your heart, click like and subscribe to honor those who served. This moment, right here in the quiet of a nursing home, is the hidden cost of freedom. We see the soldiers in the parades. We see the jets flying over football stadiums. We cheer for the visible strength, but we rarely think about the men like Thomas O'Neill, the men who were buried in silence, the men whose service wasn't about fighting, but about waiting, waiting for a phone to ring, waiting for a radar blip, enduring the psychological torture of constant vigilance so that the rest of us could sleep without nightmares. Thomas hadn't just given his years, he had given his peace of mind. He had sacrificed his ability to ever truly relax, even as his mind disintegrated. Liam stayed in the chair. He didn't move. He knew, with an instinct honed by years of watching life fade, that this was the end. Thomas wasn't going to recover. The adrenaline that had kept his heart pumping for the last 72 hours was the only thing keeping him alive. Now that the mission was accomplished, the fuel was gone. The body would follow the mind into rest. "Can I?" Thomas whispered, his eyes fluttering closed. "Can I sign off now?" Liam looked at the red notebook still in his hand. He saw the rows of shifts. Christmas Eve, 1962, on duty. Thanksgiving, 1965, on duty. July 4th, 1970, on duty. He realized that Thomas wasn't asking for permission to sleep. He was asking for permission to die. He was a soldier who followed orders to the absolute letter. He wouldn't leave his post without official authorization. Liam stood up. He straightened his posture. He adopted the formal tone one last time. "Station 4, Liam said clearly. "This is command. You are relieved of duty. Final report filed. Permission to stand down granted." Thomas smiled. It was a small, weak smile, but it was genuine. "Roger that, command. Station 4, out." His hand went limp. The breathing became shallow, spacing out further and further. At that moment, the door opened. Brenda walked in. She looked fresh, holding a cup of coffee, ready to start the morning routine. She stopped when she saw Liam standing by the bed and the utter stillness of the room. She looked at the monitor. The heart rate was steady but slowing. 50, 45. "He's quiet," Brenda said, surprised. "The sedative finally worked." Liam didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Thomas. No, the sedative didn't do anything. He just needed to finish his shift. Brenda walked over to the bed. She checked the IV. She checked the chart. She was a good nurse, technically. She knew the science, but she missed the soul. She looked at the red notebook in Liam's hand. "What is that?" she asked. "His logbook," Liam said. "He wasn't delirious, Brenda. He was reciting coordinates. He was reciting the fail-safe codes for a nuclear defense system. He's been running a drill in his head for 3 days because he thought the connection was lost." Brenda scoffed softly, though her expression softened as she looked at the frail old man. Liam, he was a janitor after the army. His file says he worked in a school district for 40 years. "That's what the file says," Liam replied, opening the notebook to the first page. "Because that's what he told people, but look at this." He showed her a faded entry from 1962. October 22nd, Cuban crisis active, DEFCON 3. Locked in, Mary called, baby is sick, cannot answer, silence is safety. God help me. He chose the silence, Liam said, his voice trembling. His kid was sick, and he stayed in the bunker because that was his oath. He gave up everything for a job he couldn't even tell his wife about. Brenda stared at the handwritten note. The cynicism in her eyes cracked. For the first time, she didn't see a dementia patient. She saw the sacrifice. She reached out and touched Thomas's hand, gently this time. "He's fading," she whispered. "Let him go," Liam said. "He's earned it." They stood witness as the sun fully crested the horizon, filling the room with a pale golden light. It washed over the water stains on the ceiling. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. The O'Neill drone was gone. The room was peaceful. At 6:14 a.m., Thomas O'Neill took a final soft breath. The monitor flatlined, not with a scream, but with a long, steady tone that sounded like a dial tone. The line was finally dead. The operator had left the building. Liam turned off the monitor. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was reverent. Brenda wiped her eyes. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I just thought he was difficult." "That's the point," Liam said, closing the notebook. "They don't do it for the credit. They don't do it so we know. They do it so we don't have to know." Liam took the red notebook. He knew he couldn't leave it here. It would be thrown in the trash, incinerated with the rest of the medical waste and personal effects of the indigent deceased. He walked to the window. His phone buzzed. It was Old Sparky 62. Old Sparky 62. "Did you give him the code, kid?" Liam typed back. "Yes." He stood down. "He's gone." There was a long pause. The typing bubble appeared and disappeared. Then, Old Sparky 62. "Then he is the last of the Northern Wall. I was Station 5. Thomas was the best of us. He never missed a check. Not once. Tell me, did he seem afraid at the end?" Liam: "No. He seemed proud." Old Sparky 62. "Good. We spent our lives listening to static, terrified that if the noise stopped, everyone we loved was dead. He carried that fear so you didn't have to. You did good, kid. You brought him home." Liam looked down at Thomas one last time. He reached into the bedside drawer and pulled out the dog tags. He placed them on Thomas's chest, interlacing the cold metal with the cold fingers. Later that afternoon, the system took over. The mortuary van arrived. 2 men in dark suits, respectful but hurried, came to collect the body. There was no family to call, no next of kin listed in the file. Thomas O'Neill was, in the eyes of the state, a zero-sum game, a file to be closed. But Liam couldn't let it end there. 2 days later, at the Veterans Cemetery on the outskirts of the city, a small service was held. It was raining again. The rows of white marble headstones stretched out like a regiment in formation, silent and orderly. There was no chaplain. The facility hadn't arranged for one. There was just a hole in the ground, a plain pine box, and the gravediggers waiting by their truck. And there was Liam. He stood by the grave, holding a black umbrella. He felt small against the vastness of the cemetery. He felt the crushing weight of the injustice, that a man who held the keys to the apocalypse, a man who gave his sanity to the service, was being buried with less fanfare than a broken appliance. Then he heard the sound of an engine. A car pulled up, then another, then a truck. Liam turned. An old sedan parked on the wet grass. An elderly man, bent with age, using a cane, stepped out. He was wearing a faded VFW cap. Then another car, a newer model, driven by a middle-aged woman. She helped an even older man out of the passenger seat. They walked toward the grave. They didn't know each other. They moved silently, drawn by a digital signal. Liam had posted the update on the forum. He had written, "Station 4 is signing off Tuesday, 1400 hours, Sector 7, Plot 19. He expected no one. He got the network. 6 men stood around the grave. They were all in their 80s and 90s. They wore windbreakers and old hats. They didn't look like warriors. They looked like grandfathers, like retirees you see feeding pigeons in the park. But Liam saw them differently now. He saw the tremble in their hands not as weakness, but as the aftershocks of a lifetime of holding the wall. Old Sparky 62, a man named Robert, as Liam later learned, stepped forward. He stood next to Liam. He looked down at the pine box. "We never met," Robert said, his voice raspy. "We only knew each other's voices. We knew each other by the rhythm of the Morse key. I knew Thomas had a heavy hand on the dash. I knew when he was tired. I knew when he was scared. But I never saw his face until today." Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metallic object. It was an old vacuum tube, a component from a 1950s radio transmitter. He placed it on the coffin. "The frequency is closed, Thomas," Robert said. He straightened up, ignoring his cane, ignoring the arthritis screaming in his joints. He snapped a salute. It wasn't the crisp, sharp salute of a cadet. It was the slow, weary, incredibly dignified salute of a survivor. The other 5 men followed suit. 6 old men standing in the rain, saluting a pine box in an empty field. Liam watched them, and the realization hit him with the force of a revelation. This wasn't a funeral for a pauper. This was a gathering of kings. These were the silent giants upon whose shoulders the modern world was built. They didn't ask for gratitude. They didn't want fame. They just wanted to know that when the end came, someone would be there to say, "Message received." Liam stepped forward. He still had the red notebook in his pocket. He realized it didn't belong in a museum. It didn't belong to him. He knelt and placed the notebook on the coffin, right next to the vacuum tube. "Mission accomplished, Station 4, Liam whispered. As the gravediggers began their work, the sound of the earth hitting the wood was no longer a sound of finality. It was the sound of a foundation being laid. The camera pulls back, rising slowly into the grey sky. The figures around the grave become smaller, merging with the thousands of white stones. The rain stops. The clouds break. A single ray of sunlight hits the fresh earth. The screen fades to black, leaving only silence. A silence that is no longer empty, but full of peace. The world moves on. The coffee shops are full. The traffic flows. The internet buzzes with noise. But somewhere, in the quiet corners, the watch continues. And thanks to a simple act of listening, one soldier didn't fade away. He was relieved of duty. If you believe every life holds a story worth remembering, subscribe to this channel and join our community. End.